She had one chance, a folded piece of paper clutched in her sweaty palm, a prayer aimed at the devil's own choir. The oppressive midday sun beat down on the gas station asphalt, making the air shimmer above the chrome of a dozen Harley-Davidsons parked in a formidable line. Elara stood beside the sleek, black sedan, her husband Marcus inside, his voice a low, condescending murmur as he paid the attendant. He thought she was docile, broken, a pretty thing he kept locked in his gilded cage. He was wrong. The fresh, purple-blue bruise hidden by the sleeve of her silk blouse was a testament to his mistake, a searing reminder that his patience had finally evaporated. Last night, his words had been colder than the steel of the gun he'd cleaned at the dining room table. "One more mistake, Elara," he'd whispered, his breath smelling of expensive scotch. "One more word out of line, and I will erase you. No one will even look for you." The sound of roaring engines had been her unlikely signal of hope. The Hells Angels, leather vests, snarling skulls, and a reputation that preceded them like a storm front. They were danger incarnate, but to Elara, they looked like salvation. Marcus despised them, called them gutter trash. And in that moment, she knew, the enemy of her enemy was her only hope. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and adrenaline. He would be out any second. She had to move. Her gaze locked on the largest of the bikers, a mountain of a man with a wild, gray-streaked beard and arms like tree trunks. He was laughing with his brothers, oblivious. This was it. Her life depended on the next 10 seconds. Taking a deep breath that felt like swallowing glass, Elara moved. She feigned a stumble, a clumsy misstep on the cracked pavement, lurching toward the group of men. Her movements were a carefully choreographed dance of desperation. She collided with the mountain man biker, her small frame bouncing off his solid leather-clad chest. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice a fragile, trembling thing she barely recognized as her own. In that fleeting moment of contact, her fingers, nimble with panic, slipped the folded square of paper from her palm into the outer pocket of his vest. It was a Hail Mary, a message in a bottle thrown into a sea of gasoline and steel. He grunted, steadying her with a surprisingly gentle hand on her arm. "Watch your step, little lady," he rumbled, his eyes, framed by weathered laugh lines, holding a flicker of curiosity before dismissing her. She pulled back instantly, her face a mask of flustered apology, and hurried back to the car just as Marcus stepped out of the convenience store, a receipt clutched in his manicured hand. "What was that?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft, his eyes narrow slits of suspicion. "I tripped," she said, her voice small, her gaze fixed on the ground. "Just clumsy." He stared at her for a long, agonizing moment, his scrutiny a physical weight. Then, he grunted and got into the driver's seat. As the luxury sedan pulled away, Elara risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The bikers were mounting their machines, a thunderous roar filling the air. The big man, her unwitting messenger, hadn't even checked his pocket. A cold dread washed over her. It was done, for better or for worse. The ride back to their sterile, isolated mansion on Willow Creek Lane was silent and suffocating. An hour later, 30 miles away, the biker known as Grizz reached into his vest for his smokes. His thick fingers brushed against an unfamiliar square of paper. Frowning, he pulled it out. It was a piece of cheap notebook paper, folded tightly. He almost tossed it away, thinking it was trash, but something made him pause. The memory of the woman, her wide, terrified eyes, the way she had practically thrown herself at him. He unfolded it. The writing was a frantic, spidery scrawl, the ink slightly smeared as if by tears or sweat. 7 words that hit him like a punch to the gut. "He threatens to kill me. Please help." Below the desperate plea was an address. 142 Willow Creek Lane. Grizz stared at the note, the raucous noise of the clubhouse bar fading into a dull hum. He remembered the bruise he'd glimpsed on her arm when he'd steadied her, a faint, ugly shadow against her pale skin. He'd seen that look before. He'd seen it on his own cousin, years ago, right before her husband put her in the hospital. A cold fury, slow and deep, began to burn in his chest. He crushed his unlit cigarette in his fist and pushed himself away from the bar. He knew who he had to show this to. Jax, the club president, was in his office in the back, going over the books. Jax was hard, pragmatic, not a man given to flights of fancy or chasing ghosts. But he also had a code, one forged in loss and etched into the soul of their chapter. This was a line you didn't cross. Abusing women, hurting the helpless. That was a sin their brand of justice did not forgive. Jax looked up as Grizz filled the doorway, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" His voice was gravel, worn smooth by years of road dust and whiskey. Grizz didn't speak. He simply walked to the desk and laid the small, wrinkled piece of paper down on a stack of invoices. Jax picked it up, his tattooed knuckles stark against the fragile paper. He read the words once, then twice. A muscle feathered in his jaw. "Where did you get this?" Grizz recounted the entire incident at the gas station. The frightened woman, the expensive car, the man with cold, watchful eyes. He described the bruise, the sheer panic he'd felt radiating from her. For a long moment, Jax was silent, his gaze distant. He was seeing another face, another time. His younger sister, Sarah. The letters she'd sent, full of excuses for her husband's temper, for the accidents she kept having. He hadn't seen the real message hidden between the lines until it was too late. The day they buried her, he'd sworn an oath. Never again. Not on his watch. He slowly folded the note, his movements precise, deliberate. "Where's 142 Willow Creek Lane?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't know," Grizz admitted. "Sounds like the rich side of the county." Jax stood up, grabbing his leather cut from the back of his chair. The Hell's Angels patch on the back, the iconic death's head, seemed to glare in the dim light. "Get your bike," Jax commanded, his eyes like chips of flint. "We're going for a ride." The address led them to a gated community, a place of manicured lawns and ostentatious houses that tried to pretend the grit and grime of the real world didn't exist. Jax and Grizz rode past the entrance slowly, two leather-clad wolves circling a sheep pen. 142 Willow Creek Lane was set back from the road, a modern monstrosity of glass and steel, surrounded by a high wall. It screamed money and isolation. Parked in the circular driveway was the same black sedan Grizz had seen at the gas station. A quick search on a burner phone confirmed their fears. The house belonged to Marcus Thorne, a real estate developer with a reputation for being as ruthless in business as he was powerful. He had connections, cops, judges, politicians. This wasn't some low-life thug they were dealing with. This was a man who hid his monstrosity behind a veneer of civility and a fortress of wealth. "This just got complicated," Grizz muttered, his earlier righteous anger now tempered with grim reality. "Good," Jax replied, a cold smile touching his lips. "I like complicated." They found a secluded spot on a wooded hill overlooking the property and settled in to watch. For hours, there was no movement. The house was like a tomb. Then, as dusk began to bleed across the sky, lights flickered on inside. They saw a silhouette move past a large window, a woman. Elara. Even from a distance, her posture looked defeated, her movements small and hesitant. A short while later, a man's figure joined hers. Marcus Thorne. His gestures were sharp, aggressive. He wasn't touching her, not yet, but the menace was palpable even from hundreds of yards away. Jax felt the old, familiar rage coiling in his gut. He had to get her out. Inside that pristine prison, Elara felt Marcus's mood shift the moment he walked in the door. The trip to the gas station had unsettled him. Her brief, clumsy interaction with the bikers had planted a seed of suspicion in his paranoid mind. "Who were you talking to?" he asked, circling her in the cavernous living room like a shark. "No one," she whispered, her eyes downcast. "I tripped. I told you." He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His grip was like iron. "Don't lie to me, Elara. I have spent a fortune making you perfect, making this life perfect. Do not think for 1 second you can ruin it." A flashback seared through her mind. The early days of their relationship, when his control had been disguised as affection. He'd chosen her clothes. To help her look her best, he'd distanced her from her friends, Because they were a bad influence, he'd taken control of her finances. To free her from the stress of it all, each step was a brick in the wall of her prison, and she hadn't realized she was trapped until the door was locked and bolted. Now, she clutched the secret she dared not reveal. A small, cheap burner phone hidden inside a hollowed-out book in the library. Her only link to the outside world, a lifeline she hadn't yet found the courage to use. As Marcus continued his verbal assault, she glanced toward the window, out into the darkening woods, and sent a silent, desperate prayer into the night. Please have found the note. Please be out there. Jax and Grizz watched for another hour. They saw Marcus leave in his sedan, tires crunching on the gravel driveway with an air of angry finality. This was their window, but a direct assault was risky. Thorn would have security, cameras, silent alarms. A frontal attack would bring the cops he owned down on them in minutes. They needed a plan. They rode back to the clubhouse, the wind whipping at their faces, carrying the urgency of their mission. Inside, the usual boisterous atmosphere was gone. Jax called a church meeting, and the core members of his chapter gathered around the heavy oak table. The air was thick with smoke and anticipation. Jax laid the note on the table. He told them everything. The woman, the house, Marcus Thorn. He didn't sugarcoat the risks. Thorn was a powerful man. This could bring a world of trouble down on the club. This isn't club business, he said, his voice level. This is about who we are. We don't let monsters hide in plain sight. We don't turn our backs on someone crying for help. Not now. Not ever. He looked at each man, his gaze unwavering. I'm going in. Anyone who rides with me rides into the fire. No one will think less of you if you sit this one out. A heavy silence hung in the room for a beat, and then Grizz slammed his fist on the table. I'm in, one by one. Every man around the table echoed his sentiment. And let's ride. For the lady, a grim sense of purpose united them. They weren't just a club, they were a brotherhood. And tonight, their brotherhood had a singular, righteous cause. The plan was simple, brutal, and efficient. A swift extraction under the cover of darkness. Back at the house, Elara's fragile hope began to crumble. She hadn't heard from anyone. The silence was her enemy, amplifying the sound of her own frantic heartbeat. Then she heard the sound of Marcus's car returning far sooner than she expected. He stormed into the house, his face a thunderous mask of fury. In his hand, he held her hollowed-out book, torn open, and in his other hand, her small, secret phone. Looking for this? He hissed, his voice dripping with venom. He must have doubled back, his suspicions getting the better of him. He'd searched her library, her last sanctuary. Her blood ran cold. He scrolled through the phone. There were no calls made, no texts sent, but that didn't matter. The intent was enough. You were going to call for help, weren't you? He sneered, advancing on her. Who did you think would come for you? The gutter trash from the gas station? You think they can save you from me? He grabbed her, shaking her violently. I told you what would happen if you made one more mistake. Tonight, Elara. Tonight, I erase you. He dragged her toward the soundproofed basement, a place she had always feared, a place for which no screams could ever escape. She fought, clawing at his hands, kicking at his legs, a wild animal cornered and fighting for its life. Her defiance only fueled his rage. He was stronger, his fury giving him inhuman strength. He threw her down the basement stairs, the impact jarring her bones as she landed in a heap on the cold concrete floor. The heavy door slammed shut, and she heard the deadbolt slide into place. Darkness consumed her. Outside, the night was still. The Hell's Angels had arrived, their bikes parked a quarter-mile down the road. They moved through the trees like wraiths, black leather blending with the shadows. Grizz, a former Special Forces soldier, moved toward the single security guard stationed in a small booth by the gate. A brief, muffled scuffle, and the guard was unconscious, tied and gagged. The gate swung, opened silently. Jax led the team of 6 bikers toward the house. They were a tight, disciplined unit, moving with a predatory grace that belied their size. As they approached the house, a muffled thud from within reached them, followed by the slam of a heavy door. Jax's blood froze. They were running out of time. Two men peeled off to disable the main security panel, while Jax and Grizz went straight for the front door. There was no time for subtlety now. Grizz slammed a battering ram into the lock, and the ornate wood splintered, the door flying open with a deafening crack. They stormed inside, weapons drawn, spreading out to clear the ground floor. The house was eerily silent. "Check upstairs," Jax barked. "Grizz with me." He'd heard the sound come from below. They found the basement door, thick and reinforced. It was locked from the outside. Jax didn't hesitate. He kicked it once, twice, the wood groaning in protest. On the third kick, the frame shattered and the door flew inward. They descended into the pitch-black space, the beams of their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. They found Elara huddled in a corner, trembling but alive. And standing over her, his face a mask of disbelief and rage, was Marcus Thorne, a length of rope in his hands. The confrontation was explosive and brutally short. Thorne, seeing his sanctuary invaded by the very gutter trash he despised, let out a roar of fury and lunged at Jax. It was a fatal miscalculation. Jax sidestepped the clumsy attack, moving with the fluid economy of a seasoned fighter. He brought the butt of his heavy pistol down on Thorne's wrist, and a sickening crack echoed in the confined space. The rope fell from Thorne's numb fingers. Marcus screamed in pain and rage, but Grizz was already on him, restraining him with a set of zip ties, cinching them with brutal efficiency. Thorne spat and cursed, his threats turning into pathetic, pain-filled whimpers. Jax ignored him completely. He knelt in front of Elara, holstering his weapon. He moved slowly, deliberately, not wanting to frighten her further. Her eyes were wide with shock and a dawning, incredulous relief. "It's okay," Jax said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "We got your message. You're safe now." He reached out and carefully helped her to her feet. She was shaking uncontrollably, so he removed his own leather vest, the heavy cut bearing the club's colors, and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm from his body, smelling of leather and road dust, and in that moment, it felt like the safest armor in the world. As he led her up the stairs and out of that house of horrors, the other bikers were already at work, not destroying the place, but meticulously searching it. They knew men like Thorne had secrets, and secrets were a weapon they could use to ensure he never hurt anyone again. They took Elara back to the clubhouse. The roar of the Harleys on the ride back wasn't a sound of intimidation, but a triumphant chorus of liberation. As they pulled into the compound, the other members who had stayed behind were waiting, a silent, respectful honor guard. The women associated with the club, the old ladies, immediately took Elara under their wing, leading her to a quiet room, bringing her warm clothes, a hot drink, and most importantly, the gentle comfort of female solidarity. They didn't ask questions, they just offered safety. Elara, wrapped in a blanket, finally let the tears she'd held back for so long fall freely. They were tears of terror, of grief for the year she had lost, but also tears of overwhelming, world-altering relief. Jack stood outside the room, listening to the soft, murmuring voices inside. He felt the ghost of his sister, Sarah, at his shoulder. This time he had been on time. This time he had answered the call. It wasn't absolution, but it was a form of redemption he hadn't known he was looking for. Grizz clapped him on the shoulder. "Good work, Prez." Jax just nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Later that night, after Elara was resting, one of his men brought him a laptop and a ledger they had found in a hidden safe in Thorne's office. It was a detailed record of bribery, extortion, and money laundering. It was the key to dismantling Marcus Thorne's entire empire. Jack smiled grimly. Justice was coming for Marcus Thorne, and it would be delivered not with a fist, but with the cold, undeniable truth he had tried to bury. He looked at Elara's note, still on his desk. 7 simple words that had unleashed a storm. He picked it up and tucked it safely into his wallet, a reminder of the oath he had kept. In the weeks that followed, Elara began to heal. The physical bruises faded, but the deeper wounds took longer. She stayed with the club, finding an unlikely family among the bikers and their partners. They protected her, respected her, and for the first time in years, she felt her own strength returning. She was no longer Marcus Thorne's victim. She was Elara, a survivor. Anonymous tips, backed by irrefutable evidence from a certain laptop and ledger, were delivered to federal investigators. Marcus Thorne's world imploded. His political allies abandoned him, his businesses collapsed, and he was arrested, facing a mountain of charges that would keep him behind bars for the rest of his life. The charges for what he did to Elara were just the beginning. One sunny afternoon, Elara stood outside the clubhouse, watching the bikes gleam in the sun. Jax walked over and stood beside her. "We heard about a job opening at the county women's shelter," he said quietly. "Thought you might be interested. If you're ready," a real smile, bright and genuine, lit up her face. "I am," she said, her voice clear and strong. She was ready to turn her pain into purpose, to become a shield for others, just as the angels had been a shield for her. As a line of Harleys roared to life, preparing for a ride, the sound no longer triggered fear. It was the sound of freedom, of brotherhood, of heroes who wore leather instead of capes. True heroes are forged in the fires of adversity, and sometimes they answer the desperate prayers of the broken, riding in on a wave of thunder and chrome to deliver a justice all their own. If you believe in these unlikely heroes, share this story. Let the world know that even in the darkest places, there are those who will ride into the storm to bring back the light. And if you or someone you know is suffering in silence, remember Elara's courage. A single note, a single plea for help can change everything.